It is currently 2 minutes after 11 o'clock. You inside Brunch. I am Rennie Bishop. Nice to have you with us. We go all the way up until 12 o'clock. And it's a pleasure, again, as it always is, to speak to political analyst, commentator, and University of the West Indies lecturer, Professor Winfield James. Professor, it's good to hear your voice again. How are you, sir?
I'm strong and good this morning.
You are stronger this morning. Well, that is good. I have to learn how to get stronger in the morning. I guess it must be getting up early, getting some coffee, doing some exercise, or one of those things.
Yes, that's part of it.
I thought I would get the secret one way or the other. Professor, if it's possible, you could speak a bit closer into the receiver for me. I am actually getting a small feedback coming at me. And our next guest, of course, is going to be Kirk Waith. And we have you for a 10 to 15 minutes, and I've got some questions for you. Everybody's talking these days about batting in your lane. At the opening of the Parliament, the President said there are issues that have become quite prominent in our society. He speaks, of course, of procurement legislation. He said, my intention is to soon advertise locally, regionally, and internationally for a procurement regulator under the present procurement legislation. Folks are saying that this was one of the central points of the Prime Minister's electioneering, and that is something that should have been left alone. The question to you, sir, is the President batting in his crease, and even if he is constitutionally, should he have just waited on this one?
Well, it's difficult to know what batting in your crease means because the President is his own batsman, and all the other batsmen before him have batted in their crease in the sense that they have done things in a traditional and expected way. Mm-hmm. This President is unconventional in his batsmanship in the sense that he has decided to advertise for the position of regulator. Mm-hmm. But the fact that he has developed an unconventional shot does not mean that he's doing anything wrong.
Indeed.
In fact, it might be a very good idea for him to do this, having regard to our queries, that is to say, our queries as a population, as to how does he know who are the people who are suitable for any jobs that he must appoint. Mm-hmm. How does he know? Does he have a database that is sufficient? Does he use his own experiences? Because some of his appointments, frankly, are strange to some of us. And it's good that the President is saying, I don't know who might be suitable here. This is a very important job, and therefore we need to go further afield. Of course, there's going to be internal advertisement as well. It's local as well. Mm-hmm. He's saying, I don't know, and I need to get me as many good choices as possible, and then I will make a choice. In other words, he's going to be building a database there and making a selection. Now, how he goes about, when he gets a pile of applications from the world, how he's going to sift between and among those applications is anyone's guess now.
Right, so that's the way he goes about getting a regulator, a procurement regulator. The question I seek for clarity is he constitutionally in his crease, as it were, to go about doing this?
Well, when I read the Constitution, and of course the best people to answer that question will be constitutional lawyers. Mm-hmm. But you know, we all read, as I said some time ago, we have an understanding of things. And therefore, as far as I can tell after I read, I don't know that he's breaking any law at all. Mm-hmm. But it's up to his discretion. Of course, he has to consult with the Prime Minister and the leader of the opposition. So it's not as if he's just simply going about his business by himself. Not that he has to account to anybody, which is one of the weaknesses of the position, quite frankly, if you ask me. But the Constitution enjoins upon him to consult with opposition leader.
Yes, but consultation does not mean acquiescence, does it?
No, not at all. It just means advice, and which is advice that he can reject. But the point is he has to talk to people. Mm-hmm. Those people that he talks with can then make public statements to the extent that they believe it is proper to do so, it's politically convenient to do so, and it is helpful to the population. but it is clear that there is nothing in the Constitution that forbids him from advertising. He's the one that is going to appoint, and he's not bound by any the law that says you have to stay here. Let's use the metaphor of the crease. You have to stay within this crease, and you can't go out of the crease to play your shot. He can't go out of the... And he cannot be stumped, by the way.
Just be very clear. Cannot be stumped or leg before or nothing. Continuing the analogy. Professor Winfield James is my guest. He's University of the West Indies lecturer, political analyst, and commentator. In the case of the outgoing government, which was the partnership, they moved procurement legislation forward just in the dying days or in the last days of their governance. The question is, it clearly seems to be the intent of the Prime Minister and the PNM to bring this back before the House. Is a simple majority that's needed here? Is that good enough to pass this bill?
As far as I understand, it's a 3/5 majority of both houses, which would mean that the government has to have 18 in the 3/5. That is what 3/6. 18, at least 18 senators in the upper house, and 24 in the lower house, which means 24. That the government in the Senate will have to win over at least 2 other members, who most likely will come from the independent bench.
Yes.
And in the lower house, well, there is no independent there. So in the lower house, they have to win over 1 member from the other side, except, of course, the speaker casts a vote. But if the speaker has I think an original casting vote. And if the government has 23 members in the lower house, I imagine, I'm not so sure about this, as I said, a constitutional lawyer or an experienced parliamentarian will be able to say better than I. But it would appear to me that if the speaker can also vote, and the speaker takes the side of the government, and it's not automatic the speaker does it, just traditionally they have gone the way of the people who have appointed them. Let's be realistic. Then the government can have the 24 members' votes that it needs. But it's a 3/5 majority, not a simple majority. I
always have to throw as much at you as I can because you're so versed. I wanted the voice you're hearing is that of Professor Winfield James. I want to throw at you this last part here because the president made the point about mediocrity being a form of acceptability in the society, and he's saying that we need to look further closely into ourselves. My question is that a value that we all learn but is suppressed because it's convenient to follow the crowd and not do much? Or is it something we now have to say, well, if it's learned, we've got to say to employers, bring it out of your people to up the game? Or do we have a whole set of retraining to do?
Well, yes, the latter. We do have a whole set of retraining to do. You see, we develop a culture, because it's a small place, and because as we say, everybody knows everybody else. That, of course, is not true. But what the statement means is that we are easily familiar with others. We tend to employ people as if they are family and friends. And because of that way of employing people, the accountability measures are not as strict. This country has been developing its people educationally for quite some time. It's one of the best educated countries in the Caribbean in terms of our levels of schooling. So there are people who are qualified. The question is whether there is, shall we say, fair play
in the employment field. Yes.
Yes. Whether there is something called, the word is slipping me now, but you have to, this meritocracy. So we are building a meritocracy, and therefore when we advertise jobs, the criteria are so objective that a person knows that if he is qualified in a particular way, and if the process of selection of scoring points and selecting people clear, then that person is going to be pretty well assured that he or she can get through. The thing is that sometimes subjective positions intervene because of the culture. We want it to really be meritocratic. And if you wanted to be even-handed, I will say immediately that we have quite a lot of people. Now let's go back to the position of regulator. What it says really that the person must have a first degree in accounting. That's it. There are a number of people in this country
First degree, yes.
that have a degree in accounting, and they have been produced by our different universities, the University of the West Indies, UTT, the other education providers like the Southern Caribbean, the University of the Southern Caribbean. There are people who have degrees in accounting, and some of them are very high levels, the professional levels. It's CCA 3, the real thing. So, in a sense, you begin to wonder why the president has to go afield. If locally we have people who have a first degree, it doesn't bind him to go beyond that, but of course he can. He can go beyond that, and even then you might find some people who are professors in the thing. But when this president speaks of mediocrity, he does not explain. He merely puts it out there, and one wonders if a president should not be clearer in his meaning, other than letting us struggle to understand what he might mean, except he's saying that we understand by default that people here are mediocre. But I don't have such an understanding. To my mind, there's some very good accountants in this country. The question is whether they want to serve in such a capacity.
Is another issue, but in a general sense, however, I think we can all every day meet very easily mediocrity that is accepted for excellence.
We may, but the point is that is our personal judgment. When a president speaks, he has to speak more clearly. He has to speak in a way that he reduces the probability of misunderstanding. So if the president is saying, and I'm not saying he's saying this, that the graduates of the University of the West Indies in accounting are mediocre, well, if he is worth his sword, if he's standing by his thought, let him say so. Because mediocrity can only be related to the office of, in this context, the office of Procurement The Regulator, because that's what he was talking about.
Yeah.
Do we have people qualified to be procurement regulators? And I'm saying by the criteria specified in the Act, parts of which, of course, have been proclaimed. Because you have to have a regulator in place before you can, what's the word? Before you can have all the other things proclaimed, the other sections proclaimed. And that the proclamation was done in July, I believe, for the appointment of a regulator.
Trust me, I'm just being tongue-in-cheek here. I'm sure the lesson has been learned. The head must be taken care of before the arms are in place, i.e. the swearing-in ceremony.
Right.
I think the lesson has been learned there. Professor, I thank you so much for taking up your time this morning. I always look for you towards you for clarity, and I appreciate Professor Winfield James joining us here inside Brunch. Professor, thank you so much. You have yourself a wonderful day, sir.
You too.
And we will be in touch. Have a wonderful day. It's 16 minutes now after 11 o'clock. You are inside Brunch. The professor kept talking a couple of times when we were talking there. I thought he was looking into the script for our upcoming guest, because he was talking about how do we go about finding the right people and knowing that we don't have subjective decisions being made and nepotism is not a thing that's happening. And my next guest talks about that, because he says for state boards, for instance, I want to see all the resumes up on a website so we can all look at it and understand how you went about this, Mr. Prime Minister. He was addressing the Prime Minister because his organization sent to the Prime Minister a letter outlining a number of areas they think must be embarked on with dispatch in order to rescue and advance Trinidad and Tobago. The organization I'm talking about is Fixing